Greetings and salutations. Welcome again to the Cashflow Ninja. My name is MC Lobshan. Thank you so much for spending your most valuable resource, your time, once again with us on the show. Please check out all of our past episodes of all of our podcasts. There's over 700 done over 5 years at cashflowninja.com, along with community resources and tools. And we're also making a big push on alternative platforms, BitChute, Rumble, Library, lbry.tv. We support the platforms that support content creators, so check us out there if you haven't followed us already. There's actually a lot of folks on Library. That platform is catching on. So we've had a couple of things happening in the markets. We've had the GameStop fiasco. We've seen in the news silver, the next big squeeze. And obviously with more stimulus packages coming, and probably more after this one down the line, precious metals comes into play. And I figured, well, let's get someone on that is an expert, very well-known, world-renowned, and legendary David Morgan back on the Cashflow Ninja podcast. He also has the Morgan Report. David, it's great to see you.
MC, it's great to be back. Thank you for the introduction. Before I move on, if I might just say, my platforms are still Twitter. It's the main one's a website, so always go there and get on the free list. But still up on YouTube, but I've had a couple strikes, and I just want to say I've moved everything, or my webmaster's moved everything to Library. I don't have all those other ones, but Library seems to be one of the best. And I think that automatically puts you on Odyssey, because I had to search for my own alternative websites, and it popped up on Odyssey pretty easily. So just let me get to that there. Back to you. Lots to talk about.
Absolutely. So let's start with where we are today, and maybe just a quick peek back and a peek where we are today, because that will bring us into the future. Your take on the economy right now, markets, where we are, the political environment and climate, the Great Reset, all these things. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, multiple. We could take hours, but I will try to be brief. I think one of the best ways to get kind of an overview, large picture, is to go to my website, the morganreport.com, and go to the About Us tab, or the About tab, and it's my handsome face, what's left of it. But right below that's a movie that I'm in. It's not about me, believe me, it's about the content. And it's called the Four Horsemen Film. It's an hour and a half long, and this is about the end of the age of empire. So everything you mentioned, MC, vectors into the end of the age of empire. The Four Horsemen Film is the name of the film. So it's political, it's economic, it's monetary, it can be weather, it can be food, it can be all the stuff that we're experiencing right now. And all these things accumulate together in this synergistic fashion, where you have multiple stresses coming from all kinds of different places. And then if we throw the illness on top of that, we got a mix for a very uncertain future. And so having said that as a general background, and I think that kind of covers all the bases very vaguely, but generally, it's what's the solution? Well, there's a different solution health-wise, job-wise, whatever, but financially, the solution has always proven to be a breakdown of trust, a breakdown of confidence, a breakdown of confidence in the political class. We don't trust the political class. A breakdown in the trust of the media class. We don't trust what they're feeding. It sounds like propaganda to me, or they say one thing on Tuesday and they contradict themselves on Thursday. So all of this people seek, they don't really like change. So they seek what's stable, what they can, as a metaphor, have and hold and rely upon. And when it comes in the financial sphere, that's precious metals. Nothing has stood the test of time during, the dark ages and good times too, but all throughout the ups and downs of the human experience than the precious metals. So now with the loss of confidence across the board, basically, what do you seek from a financial aspect? It's gold and silver primarily, platinum, palladium to some degree. And then if you go into the resource sector, you can go down the line. And I'll add one more thing, MC, and I'll turn it back to you, is Zero Hedge just came out with an article today about where you want to place your money. And it talked about hard assets versus financial assets. And of course, I've been saying this for years, but Zero Hedge has a much larger following than I do, and they prove it. They have a nice little pictorial about how well hard assets have done against financial assets over the longer term. So I'll hand it back to you.
Absolutely, and I think you really summarized it very, very well there. And I just want to recapture this because I think it's very important. The trust factor is so, it's completely gone. I think people realize through the last political cycle, not just in the United States, that there's you have the political elite class and then the rest. So there's a complete lack of trust there, lack of anything that comes from any government at this stage, and especially how most countries handled 2020, how they handled it, because nothing makes sense, nothing adds up. It's not scientific at all, although they claim that to be. And as you mentioned, the story keeps on changing. The goalpost keeps on moving. Then I want to touch base on the media too. Again, I don't think it's ever been at a lower level trust in media than this. It's actually quite interesting to see it implode, really. You look at the demographics that's still actually watching cable and news TV. It's gone. It's over. The game is over. And tying into that, the loss of actually trust in social media that falls under media, where the majority of people get their information. We saw censorship. You and I have seen it on YouTube channels. Through company Alphabet. Interesting that it's called Alphabet too. But anyway, so we've seen complete lack of trust there. We've seen complete lack of trust in corporations. Nobody believes anything anymore, regardless of what ad you're running on the Super Bowl halftime, which is also down, by the way. So not a lot of people are even enjoying sports, so that viewership is even down. And then it ties into markets and money, which you also mentioned and summarized great. The lack of trust in money, but I want to stop for markets for a second. Did we pull back the curtain? I mean, a lot of insiders and folks that have been following us for a while and writing about it, you know the game. You understand how this all works. But the general person or the average person on the street, actually the veil was lifted for them with this whole GameStop fiasco, because, if the little guy on the street, the general public, lose their house, their retirement, their pensions, nobody cares, as we saw in 2008 and 2009. But if the big guys start losing, we had politicians come out. We have president of exchanges come out. We had, it was just, it was crazy of the media starting attacking the general public. Your thoughts on just what we've seen played out with this GameStop fiasco and how the curtain was pulled back for the general public to see exactly how the sausage is made on Wall Street.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with that metaphor. You pull back the curtain, you see what's really going on. And some people know and some don't, and some have a hint, an inkling, and some have an intuition about it. But GameStop really did pull the curtain back for full exposure. And basically, the old adage, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Well, they're allowed to leverage themselves against the general retail public all they want. In fact, I think one of the investment banks years ago said, we'll rip off their faces, or some crude statement like that. Like, we don't care. In fact, we're so brutal. As long as we're making money, we'll do whatever it takes, is the way I interpret that statement. But now GameStop comes in, sees this 140 short position on a very tight float. I think it was 50 million. The people behind it obviously know how markets work, because a large float with a small short interest would be hard to run it the other way. The commodities guys, I digress slightly, are always talking about running the stops, and like, that's okay. We're the banks, they're not. We'll run the stops on these idiots because we're better than they are. So coming back to the exact point, kind of works both directions if you know what you're doing. That's what happened in GameStop. Now, problem, they might say, if you want to call it a problem, is that people that aren't sophisticated investors get into the, let's say, the emotion of, we're winning, we're doing to them what's been done to us, blah, 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 but they don't know when to get out. So anything that goes parabolic, you want to be very, very careful. And you want to sell in the strength. You want to get out. You want to leave some room for the next guy or gal to make money, and you want to just be happy with the profits you make. But I think the overall thing, and I'll zero in on it, MC, is this. it brought awareness that wasn't there before. That's the key. There's nothing more powerful than an idea. And the idea that we've been had by these people for so long, and the idea that now we have a way to exercise our power through the voting system, i.e. the monetary, the money, vote with our currency. And isn't that a revelation? And they don't like it, in my studied opinion. They don't like that curtain pulled back. They don't like the fact that there's some amount of awareness that's growing daily, and that also there is a methodology that can be implemented that will take care of, let's say, some hedge fund that's, sitting there fat, dumb, and happy until they're not, because markets do move both directions if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it was extremely interesting to see that. Number one, the politicians came out, hey, we got to take a look at this. Then you had the president of the NASDAQ come out and say, we really need to look into this. Then you had the hedge funds, which some of them have already been bailed out by other hedge funds, with serious political connections. I'm talking the current Treasury Secretary, a former Federal Reserve chairperson, sitting on an advisory board for them. Now, these guys are getting clobbered, and all of a sudden, companies like Robinhood, the trading platform, that was the worst part of it. The trading platforms actually stopped the ability for more people to come in and buy, and hoping to bring it down to save these guys. It just shows you that the trading platforms, I'll pick on one, Robinhood, which pretended to be the one for the average person. Now that curtain was pulled back and it's actually showed you, hey, this is how they make your money. You're getting free trades, but hey, they front run your trades. They're selling your data. They're selling their actual clients are the hedge funds, which you guys were going after on our platform. No. We can't have that. I think that the average person must have just been like, there was a lot of folks that reach out to us. They're like, how is this possible? I mean, exactly. That's why we're looking at other alternatives. But yeah, no, it's actually quite comical if you look at it. It would make a nice movie, another Big Short type of movie, right? With as the previous one. Let's talk a little bit about silver, because obviously silver now came back up. Before we get into the just the precious metal sides of things, but from a trading perspective, this came up as the next short squeeze. Maybe you can share just a little bit of information how this market works, what's going on there, why it was in the news, and what's there to know about it, because this is also a very, very heavily manipulated market.
Right. Well, there's been, so much, let's say, information over the years from a lot of people about it, and there's still people that I respect in this sector that will say, it's not manipulated. I mean, I have my reputation on the line. I wrote the book with Chris Marchese called the Silver Manifesto. One whole chapter is devoted to manipulation, and we use the Sharpe's ratio to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that it is manipulated. So let me start with that so people know where I stand on it. I've also made the statement years ago, and I almost wanted to take it back, but I think it's still valid. And that is, you can't manipulate the long-term trend. In other words, the long-term trend for this generation has been gold at 252 in 2000, and it's been as high as almost 2000 over that 21-year period. So clearly the trend is up. It's been up almost, not tenfold, but eightfold or whatever. However, within that overall trend, you could certainly manage the price again and again and again. As I mentioned earlier, run the stops. If you're not familiar with what that means, Google it. You'll find out what that means. But basically in the futures markets where these contracts are traded, which is really what the market is. So let me pause there, digress, and explain. You said, let's talk about silver. Applies to any commodity, but silver's more or less my specialty. So when you set the price on the commodity silver or corn or wheat or whatever, it's based on a paper price in the futures market, which was started to basically let farmers hedge their product. Farmers not interested in price movement. He's interested in making a profit. So if he grew corn and he knew what it cost him, all in sustaining costs, let's say, and it's X, and he's going to make 10%, and he could lock in that price. He didn't have to worry about his, his farm payment, his tractor payment, and everything else. He was happy with 10%, and someone else took the risk that the price might go up or down from there. So the idea of it, I'm not against it. It's just the way it's been used in the modern system, as just like the GameStoppers proved to us. We pulled back the curtain on silver and other commodities a long time ago and had a good hard look and said, wait a minute, you guys are breaking the rules you set up. You're breaking the limits you talked about. You're letting people have bigger interest in a commodity than is allowed by your own rules, and you do nothing about it. So this has gone on and on and on. Well, now with the GameStoppers moving over to Wall Street silver, you're getting more and more exposure. In fact, we're at a point right now, MC, as you're probably aware, that not only have people read the SLV and basically said, well, we track the price of silver and it might not be 999 fine. And there's all this, what I call, most people refer to as weasel clauses. They've recently come out and basically said, well, we may be having trouble getting the silver, and here's our excuse for that. And they put that in print. And I imagine that happened after some of the people that you mentioned earlier, or at that level, got together somewhere and said, we better put this in writing just in case, we can't produce the silver or make a basket valid, because they're smart people. So we've got all of that behind the silver market, and the silver market's the most shorted market of all the commodities. Usually look at it in days short. In other words, how many days of usage is the short position? Is it 1 day? Is it a week? Is it a month? And silver takes the cake and has for years. So there's a lot to the story. I want to summarize it there, give it back to you, but it's very, very heartwarming to see someone come in. I do have to say one more thing. Going against the GameStop situation, where it's a tight float, stock only, some hedge funds, and a large group, is a lot different than going against the commodities, where there's derivatives on top of derivatives on top of derivatives. When you talk the silver market, it's largely a paper market. Then there's options on futures. Then there's over-the-counter options in futures, or what they call forwards. And then on top of that, you've got all kinds of funds, ETFs. So the derivative market on the metals is absolutely phenomenal in size and scope. And it's a way to dilute the actual physical commodity by several times. You don't have that with the GameStop. You've got stock or you don't.
It's fascinating. And who stands to benefit? Well, unlike gold, silver is used in a lot of electronics, right? So the finger's pointing back again at big tech with the short. So it's in the interest of a lot of people that prices of silver and certain natural resources stay as low as possible, because it's utilized in all of the products that they manufacture.
Yeah, you touch on a point that most people don't know. I mean, you could say there's the oil cartel, which there is, but there's really no group on another commodity other than silver. It's called the Silver Users Association. And this is a group of not individuals, but of corporations that use a lot of silver, and basically they band together for their own purposes, which is kind of what you already outlined. So, you don't have that in corn, you don't have that in the foodstuffs or coffee, the softs, or the sugar market or anything else. Now, there is some funny business in all the commodities. I mean, you could talk about orange juice, but the point I'm making is no one has put together a band of corporations called the Orange Juice Drinkers Association, but there is the Silver Users Association. They're very quiet, but their mandate's pretty clear. We will have it and you don't. And I have to reference, 1984 has been very popular over the last several months because of what's happening to society at large, and I absolutely commend that. But the other one that isn't talked about as much is Animal Farm, which gets back to your main point you started. All animals are created equal, except some animals are more equal than others. If you're a hedge fund on Wall Street and the GameStop people are beating you at your own game, we better have a meeting because we're more equal than you guys are. And we better have somebody stop this because we're more equal than you are, which of course is preposterous. The whole reason this country was the way it was founded is same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. A citizen was actually the strongest position to have. you were actually had all of your God-given rights constitutionally secured, and the only reason for any authority was to secure those rights, those God-given or natural rights. That's why government was even allowed to exist by the people. How far we have come.
It's quite incredible, and if you look at, you talk about the founding of the United States, just in the Constitution, what money is. I mean, it's right there in it's right there for everyone to see that they wanted honest money at the center of this new society and this new world that they're trying to create. And obviously, we've lost complete trust in our money too. Your thoughts on the stimulus upon stimulus that's coming, the QE, the quantitative easing, the whatever you want to call it, the massive amount of money printing, the results. I mean, I just look at it right now and just see that we still have the statistics is quite frightening. The folks that are behind on rent and on mortgages in this country. So you look at that, you look at businesses going under, you look at commercial real estate, you look at this big mess. I mean, how much money do you think they're going to throw at this to not have it completely evolve in a crash? And what impacts will that have on the real money, gold and silver, in your opinion?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, but it's not going to be a 2-sentence answer. So how much will they print? And the answer to that is as much as they want. And then the question arises out of that as well. At what point does the market say, oh, I see where this is going. We're going into a hyperinflationary depression, or at least an inflationary depression, or perhaps I'll say a stagflationary depression. So I don't think there's any limit to the amount they'll try. And I'm going to answer the rest of the question, hopefully fair and balanced. I mean, I do have empathy. I have compassion, probably a lot more than someone that would say will rip their face off for their money. I'm probably at the opposite end of that spectrum. Okay. However, I also try to be balanced. So should it be done? The answer is you could argue both ways. I'm saying people are that hurt. Industry's been that destroyed. Yeah, I think we have to do something. Is it morally the absolute best way to go? I don't know, but I know I'm a practical person. It's like, I'm not going to argue the merits of it, but I will here at the end. So let's do what we need to do to try to help keep each other going. And then, there's consequences to pay. And the one to pay is what I just said, the effect on precious metals. But before I get there, I want to give you a pictorial metaphor, which is much better done in picture form than verbal, but I'm pretty good because I've done this a couple times. It's actually at a health seminar where I saw this, and it shows a lion. And since you're from South Africa, you can probably relate better than most. And it's a lion in the savannah, and this is the king of kings. I mean, this animal is majestic. It's out there. You can see the wind blowing through the hair. You can see these eyes piercing out into the savannah. It's just breathtaking to me. And that is a lion being a lion. Oh, wow, David, you gave us so much information, but let me continue. So then you switch over to a subsidized lion, a lion that gets everything. It gets its food, it gets its water, its habitation is like its natural habitat, but it's only so big. It's caged in. But it gets healthcare free, food free, and it has a mate given to it. And you look at a picture of that lion and it's mangy, it's not clean. You can see the depression in its eyes. Its eyes aren't sparkling and glowing, and it just exists. So the metaphor there, or the analogy, is that for people to have purpose is what makes life so wonderful. And the uncertainty of life is what adds to the human spirit. And I am not saying that we shouldn't be providing for our brothers and sisters in need. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to convey in a letter, in this metaphor, in this analogy, is that, we really have been controlled so much more than most people think. And it only comes at this age of empire, referring to that movie that I referred to at the beginning, where people actually wake up and say, oh my God, the ship is sinking. What they don't realize is that it's so far in the water now, the chance of escape is almost impossible. But right now, financially, there still is a chance of escape. and that is the precious metals. And there are others. I'm not against cryptos. I think cryptos kind of can work alongside it. And that lifeboat financially is where people could go. Is it going to make your life better? Probably not. It could make your children's life better or your grandchildren's life better. It will help you preserve what you've worked so hard for. And it is basically outside the system. And so there's lots of reasons to have some portion of your net worth in precious metals. I'm stronger on that opinion than I've ever been because of what's gone on with the political class. That's even the medical. I mean, everything is corrupt. The medical establishment, the education system, the political class, the monetary system, the legal system. I mean, Jefferson said, and I don't have the quote, but, if you, the three ideas of government, are having it split three ways, executive, judicial, and legislative. The judicial branch was there for a very important reason. It's, again, it's our God-given constitutionally secured rights. And the judicial branch was there to secure those God-given rights and have final judgments. Is it in adherence with our founding principles or is it not? And if you lose that, you've lost everything. And we have. Unfortunately, we have. And of course, people know that. I mean, Gerald Celente is really good about, it's about just us. Justice is just us, just the people that could get on TV and say, we got to do something about these Robin Hooders, those rotten little Robin Hooders. Anyway, I digress. I get emotional. I get upset. I've been looking at this my whole life, basically. I want life to be fair. First thing I taught my two daughters is life is not fair. I don't expect it to be fair, but I think to move it to be more fair instead of less fair, I feel that my purpose in life has been served somewhat. Unfortunately, if I look at, my own scorecard, I could say it's been somewhat of a failure, but that doesn't mean I can't keep fighting. And I have moved a lot of people into thinking better, and the precious metals, which I still believe in my heart of hearts is a way to maintain your wealth. It's not the answer for everything, but it does help a great deal. And I think will help even more in the future. So I hope I didn't be a windbag on that, but I felt every word coming out because it's vitally important that we wake up to the truth, and there's very little of that available.
No, I appreciate it. We have a small window. I don't think people realize that there's a small window. If you look at all these different things that you spoke about, we talked about the lack of trust in the political system, the media, social media, corporations, market, money, medical. What a complete disaster it is. I mean, you're going from don't worry about masks, it's not going to do anything, to now everybody must wear one. Now it's like two. I mean, it's an absolute circus. Any person with logic, reason, and critical thinking is going to shake their head at this and go, what is going on? Am I like in an insane asylum right now? Like, none of this makes sense. But back to your point, the legal framework, that's the part that I think that people should be even the most concerned about, because the legal framework, especially in most of the Western world, and especially in the United States, I mean, the Constitution is there to protect the citizens from their government. That's the primary purpose of it. And now you can circumvent that to essentially, through medical martial law, which it basically is, to go after folks. And you're starting to see businesses shut down and folks lose their jobs. And to your point, as a compassionate human being that love my fellow humans, as crazy as we all are as a species, we're unique, Trust me, they're laughing at us from a different planet somewhere saying, look at these crazy folks on this spinning bowl of dirt. But as a compassionate human being looking at this, it wasn't that I look at some of the businesses, right, even in the town that I live, it wasn't because of bad business decisions that was made that they went out of business, that they said, okay, you know what, we have to regroup. Here's the lesson from this. I can build something else, and this is going to make me better and stronger. It was basically dictated to them that you're being shut down and there's consequences for you not doing that. And a lot of business owners, some of them have loans, SBA loans, business licenses. So yes, I understand where there's a lot of folks saying, well, don't shut down. I get it. completely get it. But then there are other folks with business loans, business licenses. So you pull a business license. Now the loans can be called because now, you know, there's a lot of fine print, as you mentioned earlier, in contracts. But yeah, so there definitely needs to be something for there. But I think for our listeners and for our viewers, I mean, great points about the legal framework. That was the biggest shock, I think, globally. Just seeing what's going on in Australia, you know, Europe, other countries, it's very, very scary. And this is going to, I mean, severely impact people's money, their ability to produce and create a living for themselves and their family and take care of themselves. So some of your thoughts on what happens next. Now we've seen, you know, we've clearly seen that there's a globalist sort of ideology, for lack of a better term, because it is almost like a religion if you look at how the Davos crowd talks about it. You know, talking about the Great Reset and this new world that they want to create based from this and rebuild and build back better. Where do you see this all going? You know, we've heard the terms the Great Reset. We've heard a new Bretton Woods moment is needed, you know, as the IMF talks about it. What are some of your thoughts there? And I know you've mentioned precious metals is a great way of hedging against this and actually protecting what you have. But what are some of your thoughts just on what I just mentioned?
Yeah, well, I refer to the globalist as, you know, the money power or the elites or whatever. So it's not too important what we call them, but they exist. And as you mentioned at Davos or the World Economic Forum, I've been writing about this in the paid version of the Morgan Report for several months. Their money, if money is power, which I believe it is, and you know, most of our politicians are obviously bought and paid for. So the political class can be bought for the most part. Then what you have is control. So money is control. And now the elites don't really care about money. Now that sounds preposterous. They have so much, it doesn't mean anything to them. You know, what's another 5 billion when you got 140 billion, right? But they do care about control. So they control us with the money, and now they're controlling us with the medical situation. So with the money, it's only about, I'll just make up a number, 90% control. They want 100%. So what do? Get rid of cash, make a cashless society, put everybody on a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. Everyone wants decentralized, right? Of course we do. Silver's decentralized. If you buy something from me with a piece of silver, it's between us. It's decentralized. But it's centralized digital currency. So no cash, central bank digital currency, everything will be traced. Even if you do a garage sale, the only way you can transact, I mean, you could barter, but if you're going to use a monetary instrument, I'll call it, or currency or digital currency, it's going to be phone to phone or whatever. So that's part of it. The other part is the cognitive map, how everyone thinks. So if you're on the grid with the digital currency, no cash, no anonymity whatsoever, everything is traced, tracked, and taxed. The next step is your thinking. Are you thinking clearly enough to be able to be part of this system? Which, of course, China's led the way with the social credit score. And it's being done the same in the West with different names and perhaps more subtle. But nonetheless, the obfuscation of our own thinking ability for shows like yours and mine that were basically banned from the large social media platforms because it was not thinking correctly is also a trend that will continue. I also, and I don't want to say it, but I'm very much intrigued with you, MC, and your openness, and a lot of interviews I do are very open as well. But I just feel like going a little deeper this time, and it's not something I really want to say, but you asked me what I think. It's what I think. It's my opinion. It doesn't guarantee I'm even right, but I think there's definitely depopulation situation in mind of the powers that be. I think if you clearly critically look at what's happening in the food supply system, the anti-meat propaganda about, it's got to be fake meat. You're a bad person if you grow your own food. You can't be next to another one of those nasty germ-providing humans. You got to be 6 feet away. I mean, it's pretty obvious if you have eyes to see and you listen, or just observe carefully, if you actually see instead of look, what the direction is. So it's complete, total, absolute control of what you think, do, and say, how you move through your day. And eventually it'll get to how big your cubicle is going to be. And you're either going to be in or out. And I do believe, those that are so inclined could look at a biblical record and what's forecast to see there may be a day where you have to make a choice. And if you have to make a choice whether you eat or you don't eat, providing a certain aspect of your, let's say, your body or a part of your body or the way you think, or all these, let's say, combination of being a good quote unquote citizen or not being a good quote unquote citizen, when good is defined by a certain percentage of the population against critical thinking, against the balance that nature needs. We need balance. We need that left, that right. We need the in between. I'm not really left or right, probably not a good metaphor, but up, down, black, white, doesn't matter. You get the point. The point is nature preaches balance. You can't have balance if everybody's on one side of the ship.
Absolutely. The yin and the yang, and, have different ideas from different angles and different viewpoints. And it helps you to think through it and with reason and logic and critically analyze it. And then eventually you formulate your own opinion or your own worldview. Now, to your point, after growing up, in South Africa and living through a very interesting part in our country's history, let's just say, I started looking into a ton of stuff and critically looked at everything, because you saw one thing as it was presented that turned out completely not what it ended up being as presented. And then you start traveling overseas, you meet interesting people from all walks of life and all different places and so forth, and you get to really look into, hey, what really went on there? And then all of a sudden you start to see that, hey, there were certain times in the country there that, for instance, not more than 10 people were allowed at a house. Hey, guess where that happened? In most countries that had totalitarian governments. But to your point too, it's like, on a human level, it's almost been the propaganda, has been very, very, very powerful. We're afraid of each other now, all of a sudden, because we have cooties. We got to stay 6 feet apart, basically. You just walk across the street and somebody sees you, they're running over to the other side with their dog. They've got their mask on. Their dog doesn't have a mask on. It's kind of crazy. And just a typical human interaction, folks that would come to your house or for dinner, or you go somewhere else, or restaurants or communities. It's almost like just a divide that almost happened. And to your point, using the analogy of the cubicle, I feel like the world just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And where does it stop? So we are very much on this program dedicating this year to sharing things and ideas and having amazing guests such as yourself to help people become self-reliant, take control of their life, be in control, so that they can prosper through very, very interesting times, because I think there's some very, very scary times ahead, but there are things that you can do to take care of yourself and your family, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely. David, this has been incredible. I really want to just thank you so much for spending your time with us. Can you please share just where folks can follow you, where they can reach out? I know you'd mentioned some social media platforms, but you also have fantastic books. The Second Chance one is amazing. I have that one. It's full of highlighter. Read through that one. Where can folks learn more about you? Where can they get access to the Morgan Report and follow you and stay informed with all the amazing content and powerful information that you share?
I'll get there. But before that, I want to just do a shout out to a fellow South African, on your behalf. I'm not. And that's Michael Tellinger. And he's written a
Yes.
book. I think it's called Ubuntu. I don't want to mess it up, Michael.
Ubuntu, yes. Yep.
Yes. Oh, I read that book and was interested on one of my, back when we traveled, right? One of my lectures, I think it was overseas, it might have been the States, I can't recall. What I can recall is a young gentleman about your age came up to me and gave me the book. And I think I told him I'd already read it, but I would take a second copy. But there is a real hero in my view. And, I know, there's a lot of people I read, look at, but he's been through the ringer, but he's come out better than ever. And I just wanted to, your accent and your openness and your striving to find how we can help each other resonated with me, and it just brought him to mind. So let me talk about that for a second. And now back to me. TheMorganReport.com is the best place to go. Please get on our free list. If you don't want to pay the paid subscription, that's fine. I provide a lot of free information. But if I am shut down from these platforms, especially depending how perhaps outspoken I am on the silver and gold markets and the elite and all that I talk about, we'll at least be able to get in contact with each other through the website. On the website are the books, the blog. If you don't want to sign up for the free stuff, you can go to the blog and get probably 80% of it. I put on the blog itself. There's some interesting situations on the right-hand side. And I think that pretty much covers it. From the blog at the top, there's a little, line with different icons. Our Twitter feed, our YouTube channel, our Facebook presence, our LinkedIn, all that stuff's up there if you're interested in any of those platforms. They're all going at this time, but I, again, think that be familiar with our library presence. I think we may end up there in the not too distant future.
And I would also recommend the Four Horsemen movie. Great documentary that covers a lot that we talk about today. And appreciate you mentioned Michael Tellinger with the Ubuntu African humanist philosophy. I am because we are. At a time like this, I do think about that quite a bit. And it's a very, very powerful message. So appreciate you sharing that. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you and the time that you spend with us and all of the value that you provide for all of our listeners and viewers out there.
Yeah, my pleasure.